over to me. And thank you everyone for joining us for this session. We hope you enjoyed hacking throughout the day and collaborating with different team members till the evening. As we move closer to the event, we are now moving towards the career panel discussion, where we'll be joined by some great and experienced people who bring with themselves rich experience from the field of sustainability, working with data, and data science as a profession in general. Before we start, few pointers. This session will be recorded. Second, we will be disabling the audio and the video for all the attendees except the panelist and moderator, myself. This is to ensure that we don't have any audio and video overlapping during the entire panel discussion and we can have a smooth ride. And last but not the least, right after the moderated panel discussion, we will be giving 20 to 30 minutes of questionnaire rounds where we will be allowing the attendees to ask questions to the panelists. So if you go to the career panel channel on the Slack, that is where we request the people to post their questions. You can post them right now or when the question answer starts. If you don't want to post a question, but you see there's a question posted which you think would be a good idea to ask to the panelists, we would be willing to ask a question. Again, we will not be allowing the attendees to directly ask the question to the panelists here, but we'll be picking up the question and I'll be acting as a bridge and asking the questions to the panelists. So without further ado, I will start the panel discussion and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can welcome our panelists. We'd also request that all the panelists have their videos on and audios on because when you speak, we hope to see you on the screen. So welcome everyone and thank you all for joining for the panel discussion tonight. Let's first start with the introduction. So today we are being joined by Amanda Giang. Amanda Giang is an assistant professor in the Institute of Resources, Environment and Sustainability and the Department of Mechanical Engineering at UBC. Her research addresses challenges at the interface of environmental modeling and policy through an interdisciplinary lens with a focus on air pollution and toxic chemicals. Welcome, Amanda. Next is Lara Thompson. Lara is a lead data scientist on the Explain Data team at Tableau. Before that, she led a team doing machine learning on home energy time series data. In her own words, switching from maths and science was worth it. Building models of the real world is so much more meaningful. We welcome you, Lara. Next is Marjan Moodi. Marjan got her master in AI, focusing on computer vision and deep learning applications in Iran. She immigrated to Canada 2 years ago and started her career as a computer vision engineer working on smart recycling applications. In her current role as computer vision engineer at Ecoation Innovative Solutions, she designs and trains models to detect and track various objects in greenhouse environment. Welcome, Marjan. And last but not the least, Megan McCorkadale. After a degree in mathematics and statistics from Acadia University, Megan pursued a master's in statistics from SFU. After leaving her first job as an analyst at Deloitte, Megan worked at Mobify and Absolute Software before joining Mozilla in 2018 as a senior data scientist. Welcome, Megan. Again, on behalf of the entire team of Vancouver Datajam, I would like to thank all the panelists for joining us tonight. So let's move directly to our first question, since I already introduced you, and we know that you all had unique journeys everywhere. So my first question would be along the same lines. How would you describe your journey to your current position, be it academia or industry? Marjan, would you like to take the lead?
Sure. Thanks, Sershli. Hello, everyone. My experience in data science is in both academia and industry. Where I started working on the data science project, I was a student, AI student, and I was working as a researcher there. there I was exposed with different types of data, the time series data, finance data, and the image and text data. But most of them was just the course project data and toy problem. When I switched to industry, I was exposed with more real world data, that has its own challenges. And at my first job here at Canada, I joined the company as an intern that was working on a smart recycling. The product was a smart system that leads people to find the right bin to throw in their garbage. There I was working as a computer vision intern, and then I switched to full-time as a computer vision engineer. In my current role, I am working on visual data again, but as in a greenhouse environment. So we work on the visual data to extract meaningful information and merge them with other data from other sensors and create a risk map and detect the anomalies in the greenhouse environment and help growers to grow smarter. Yeah, that's it.
That's fantastic. Nice to know about your journey. Amanda, would you like to tell your journey next?
Sure. Also, just hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on this panel. It's really exciting to see the work that everyone was doing. So I think if you had talked to me in high school, I probably couldn't have predicted that I would end up with in a career, doing simulation modeling and data analysis. But in undergrad, I was studying engineering, not necessarily because I was considered math or science like a natural strength, but I was really interested in what how we could apply those tools for human well-being and justice. And so I was studying biomedical engineering, and I caught the research bug pretty early. And it was something that actually shifted my interest from, I should say I was still interested in human health, but I became interested more in the environment's role in human health and thinking about human health from a preventative paradigm. So I had one of my first jobs in university was as a research assistant, working in a lab that did that kind of work. It really was pretty eye-opening for me in terms of thinking about the linkages between human well-being and the environment in different ways. And also got me really excited about research. And so I had lots of other jobs, but I feel like research was something that I found really interesting and exciting. And so it's something that I wanted to pursue in graduate school. And in particular, through some of my other professional experiences as an undergrad, I was really interested in the intersections between engineering and public policy as potentially like a real site for potential change, like a place where engineering tools could be applied to support decision making. So that's what I focused on in graduate school, and continued my research career now. In graduate school, I also realized that teaching and mentorship were something that I really enjoyed, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue a career in academia. And yeah, I think I've talked long enough about that now, so I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you so much. Lara, how about yours?
Yeah, sure. I think I still may have spent longer in academia than Amanda. She looks young enough as possible. I somehow also loved research, and I managed to stay through not one, but two postdocs before I decided that actually the pace of academia was too slow. And as much as I did math, physics, and then the second postdoc was actually neuroscience. I did love it all. It's just, it felt contrived, it felt artificial. I found data science, I kind of knew it was getting big, but at the same time, I just thought, well, it's not important, right? Like, I did physics. Physics is clearly the most important thing. But anyway, I got into machine learning. I'm like, oh no, this stuff is actually very powerful. It's interesting. There are even physics doing physics on it. Like, I don't know if there are any physicists in the audience, so I won't get into it. But so it's pretty powerful and amazing. And my first job was at a small startup where my physics skills were appreciated. They were doing home energy data. So knowing the difference between real and reactive power turned out to be useful, luckily. And at the same time, I developed all the skills that are necessary to do data science, which are far more than just math, right? And then my second job at Tableau now, I'm find the machine learning is simple, but the challenges are greater. So it's pretty fantastic.
You've come a long way. Megan, how about yours?
Sure, mine's a little bit different, a little bit less academic, and a little bit more industry. Hi, everybody. Thanks again for having us and organizing such a great event. Yeah, so my background is I did my undergrad in math, and I ended up kind of falling into a co-op term at Statistics Canada in I think my third year of undergrad. And that was the first time I really worked with any statistics at all, or programming, like statistical programming. And then I realized, okay, this might be kind of interesting. So I ended up taking a few more statistics classes like at the end of my degree, and then ended up going and doing a master's in statistics at SFU. I ended up leaving that before I finished my degree, so I don't even have a master's really, but to go and work in industry. So I got a job at Deloitte to do kind of statistical consulting. They called it advanced analytics. This was roughly 2012, 2013-ish. So it was right when data science was becoming that word that everyone was starting to talk about, which was really good timing on my part. And yeah, so I ended up started working there, learning a lot of SQL on the job, things like that, like more hands-on data cleaning and data munging, all of that fun stuff. The long hours for consulting was not really my thing in a very corporate world. So I went on LinkedIn and I searched the word data and applied to every job that had data in the title, which, you know, it works kind of. So I ended up working for a tech startup here in Vancouver for a while, doing like mobile e-commerce analytics. I got hired as an analyst, but then when a paternity leave happened, I got to take over a data science job. Therefore, that's how I got my title changed. Again, kind of like luck and timing there. And then since then, have worked at a couple of other different tech companies before now, ending up at Mozilla, which is kind of best known for making Firefox, the web browser. And we are, it's nice. It's a very mission-oriented company, which is actually fully owned by a nonprofit, which is pretty rare in tech. So it's nice to be able to work for a tech company and not feel like you're working for something evil, which is great. So yeah, and plus what kind of drew me there was there's a large team of data scientists. So a lot of collaboration and a lot of people to learn from, which is like pretty interesting. So yeah, that's my career progression, I guess.
Thank you so much, Megan. You really had I mean, I think the timing, as you say, was pretty on point when you started in data science. But even having said that, throughout your journey, the soft skills which you had over time would have played a very important role. So if I had to ask you, what kind of soft skills should data scientists focus on early in their career? What advice would you give?
Sure. Yeah. I have now been in the position where I've interviewed for data science jobs, and I've also like been the interviewer for data science jobs, which is a very different and also still sometimes stressful position to be in. But yeah, I think a lot of people, when they're applying for their first or early data science jobs, they're really focused on the technical skills that they have. And those are important. You want to have solid technical skills. You want a good basis in stats and some basic programming. I think knowing SQL is really important because that's actually what I use a lot in my day-to-day is actually extracting the data in a right way. And you know, you want some basic stats, statistical knowledge. You want some data visualization skills. Those are sometimes overlooked. And I think some of the presentations that I saw today look like people are actually doing pretty well with the data viz, which is like really exciting. And those are very good skills to have. But I'd say like one of the things that people miss is the communication skill and being able to communicate your findings in a way that speaks to your audience. So whether that's a technical audience or a non-technical audience. So presenting to a bunch of engineers is going to be very different than presenting to like a CEO or presenting to like a research scientist. They're going to speak different languages, and you need to be able to present your findings in a way that they understand and then they can, you know, use basically. And so a lot of times the focus is on the really nitty gritty, like technical details. And a lot of part of it is just knowing what actually kind of answer are you looking for? Do you need a direction? Do you need a yes or no? Do you need a specific number? And those are very different kind of projects. And knowing when to stop when you have enough information to make a decision versus I know coming from academia, you want to like know everything about the problem and just keep working on it and keep working on it. And knowing when to let go and just say, I know enough to make my decision is actually really hard. And I'd say the majority of my work is not really fancy machine learning methods. Unfortunately, it's a lot of like data cleaning and doing things like that, or
that's the important part.
running basic A/B tests. Like a very simple t-test can sometimes give you what you need to know. So understanding your data and understanding how to communicate that is, I think, one of the most important things. And I think that applies not just in industry, but also in other places. But I think some of the other panelists could speak to that better than I could.
Yeah, I mean, you have almost covered a lot of important points altogether. But these are the soft skills. Lara, if you would like to follow up on the same question, but from a more technical perspective. So if I had to ask, what kind of data should a beginner in this field get hands-on with? And what are some unique challenges that come along with? What would your opinion be?
So it's funny you ask me, because at Tableau, that's the one challenge. I don't have data. Tableau gets installed in people's work sites and they keep the data to themselves. So I am on the hunt for data all the time. So I guess as a beginner, it's probably good to start with the clean data, like the stuff you find on Kaggle or in benchmarks, that kind of thing. But very quickly, you want to also get your hands dirty. I think what Megan was saying is very important. And I think your data jam, a lot of people did this. You have to go out, scrape the data, clean the data, and merge multiple data sets. You can't answer real questions without going through all of that. And that's going to take a whole variety of skills, which is great. It'll get your sort of Python skills really exercised, hopefully Python at all.
So Kaggle, people should see Kaggle.
It still do the nice clean data sets too, because it'll shortcut you to some of the interesting things. So you can also get a feel for all the models, because different models are good on different data sets. But definitely do some dirty scraping too. Yeah,
absolutely. Marjan, since you started into this field a couple of years ago, so you're still fresh with your memories, how you jumped right into this field and what challenges you faced. So from a perspective that when you started a few years before and you have come a long way here, what would be your experience and like what data should beginner data scientists focus on?
Yeah, actually, if I want to share my experience, I needed data to for different purpose, for visualization, for applying a machine learning model, for working with big data tools, and I can remember the first one. But for these three, you can always download the clean data that you shouldn't be struggling with different challenges of the dirty and real world data, because you want to improve your machine learning knowledge, you want to improve your visualization tools or libraries that you know. But when you jump into the industry, then you will understand that the data that is in the real world is much more different from the very clean data set that you can find in the Kaggle, for example. So before jumping to the industry, if you are passionate about some field, for example, sustainability, you can search the websites that have clean data. For example, there are the dirty data. For example, there are lots of websites that have raw data from climate.
Right.
So you can download them and
do some cleaning, do some hands-on.
What is data science exactly? Because most of the time people concentrate too much on just the machine learning models or just visualization. But the data science is all of them. You should face with the dirty data, see the missing data, and try to solve this kind of problem to know what you are going to be as a data scientist.
Yeah, I remember when I first started in my first job, when I went from research to industry, I realized 80% time I was cleaning the data, 20% time I was using it to run the model, which is funny. That's now how I used to do research. But yeah, you bring up a great point. So when we talk about, so this was a discussion when we say a lot about data, like data in general, but a theme for tonight is sustainability. And there, it's possible that there are data scientists out there who have knowledge about knowledge about using the data. But in fact, there might be people who are not really data scientists, but they are enthusiasts who can fiddle with data, but they don't have the domain expertise. So speaking about sustainability, say, question for you, Amanda, what are some ways data scientists or even non-experts without sustainability expertise can involve themselves in this line of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I did just want to add two more sources of, like, I would say at least quality assurance and quality control data for people who want to dip their toe in. Certainly Google Earth Engine is an incredible source of environmental data. And also from the research side, there is a lot more, a real push towards a more open data perspective. So there are lots of great data repositories where you can find, state of the science research data sets that are most of the time, because they've already been published, are already clean. So some of those include Pangea. Zenodo is a kind of general purpose one. But sorry, that was the previous question. For this question, though, I will just say that looking at the projects, it seems like people here already have a good sense of how those with a data science background can get involved in sustainability challenges. I think there's so many opportunities for just the bread and butter skills for a data scientist, from like description, visualization, prediction, classification, to be applied to sustainability challenges. And to echo something that Megan said earlier, it's like, I'm not even necessarily talking about the most advanced machine learning algorithms. Like, there's so much low-hanging fruit that can really benefit individuals, decision makers, institutions. Like, if you are in Vancouver and you looked out your window today, for instance, you probably would have seen the kind of apocalyptic wildfire smoke situation that we're in. And this is also the case just like up and down the west coast of North America right now. Every day you have so many people who are trying to look at interactive real-time maps of air quality, try to understand what that means in terms of what does that mean compared to other places in the world? What does that mean for health? And so this is really kind of descriptive analysis that is so useful. And I think that's true actually across so many different sustainability domains right now, where, again, it doesn't have to be the most advanced thing. There's so much utility just because there's such a need to understand these really complex and heterogeneous phenomena that are happening. That being said, in terms of ways to get involved, I think opportunities like this hackathon are a great one. Certainly, I'll make the plug for academia as well. I think one of the things, certainly as someone whose home department is an environment and sustainability department, is that a lot of, we're often looking for people with that kind of technical training and that skill background, but who have a passion or interest in environmental and sustainability issues, so that they can really hit the ground running in terms of using that skill set to answer some of these problems. But of course, there's so many other opportunities, like right now in private sector, civil society, government, so many, I think it's just because there's this real recognition that there's such a need for this skill set.
Absolutely.
And also that some of it isn't even stuff that necessarily gets advertised as looking for a data scientist. I feel like so many community organizing groups right now are looking for people with those sorts of skills to help push organizing and advocacy as well. So I feel like so many creative opportunities and so much potential to offer really usable skills.
Yeah, so it's like these guys, the people who have this experience in data, can definitely act as a bridge in the field where they're needed, especially like sustainability. And I think one of the examples that you gave with an interactive map for the wildfires, I think it is something which we can do right now. There won't be best time to have this real-time data to actually build out something from it. Thank you so much for all these examples and all these sources, Amanda. Marjan, if I had to ask you, if you had to answer the same question, since you are also a data scientist and you are working directly in the field of sustainability, how did you gain, as a non-expert in this field, how did you gain knowledge over the course of time? And what did you feel that maybe you could have done better, or you're actually doing really good at?
Yes, actually, it's very important if you are interested in a field, you try to find people like you When I was searching for a job here in Canada, I found the first company that I joined that was working on smart beans. And the motivation behind the company made me motivated to apply for the job. So I started writing the CV, and that's cover letter that I sent for that company was the most it comes from my heart that I'm really interested to this product.
Right.
So I sent the cover letter and my resume, and then they reached me out quickly. So it's important to show you're passionate about the field, any field, the sustainability or other field. So try to create portfolio related to that field. Work on with the public data set that is available and show that you're interested in the social media, professional social media like LinkedIn. And yes, all the things help you to find your way.
Yeah, I read somewhere. What do you? Oh, I think I'm echoing myself. Oh no, I'm not. I read somewhere that. Sorry, am I echoing?
I'm gonna mute people, folks. One sec.
Oh, sorry. So I was just saying that I read somewhere that cover letter is the most underestimated part when you're applying, especially when you're applying to smaller companies who are looking for candidates interested in their field. The stuff you write in the cover letter makes them filter you out from a pool of candidates because not everybody's possibly applying at the same time. When you show interest, that makes you differentiate from the others. And I got this one feedback from one of the HR managers when I applied. I did not end up working there, but this was on the feedback. And they did read my cover letter. I didn't really anticipate that, but that's good to know. So when we're talking about data in general or data in the field of sustainability, when we're talking about the applications, we have to also consider the ethical side of these applications. So sometimes we believe that the best solution is just to have data, but we don't think about how we will use this data. Now, I want to know the opinions of the people here on how has the discussion around ethics impacted how we work with data. Now, data in general, and possibly we can also discuss later the data in the field of sustainability. Megan, as someone who's working at Mozilla, you have a lot to deal with data, especially from the ethical point of view, and as the company's strong proponent of privacy and ethical concerns. Can you share your opinions out how has data and ethics evolved over time from your experience?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something that has become something that's talked about a lot more in the last few years, and I think that's a really good development. Working at Mozilla has been really great in that they are very opinionated and strategic about how we collect data. We have a whole program called based on lean data, our Mozilla lean data practices, where we are very careful about what we collect and how we collect it. So we have a whole program of data stewardship where any new data that's being collected has to be peer reviewed and approved and make sure that we can actually justify doing this collection instead of trying to answer questions with the data that we already have, to try and limit the amount of data that's collected. But that's something that I think not just, browser companies should be doing, but also anyone who's working with data should really be thinking about how is this data collected? Is this collected in in a solid way? Is there consent for this data that is being collected, or are you just siphoning this data off without people knowing it? How is this data stored? Is it secure? Is someone going to be able to break into this and use this data in a horrible way? These are things we have to think about when we're collecting it, because every new piece of data that you collect is a risk.
Yeah,
not just legally, but also just ethically. You want to make sure that you're not collecting data that could potentially be harmful. So as kind of data professionals, it's, I think, our responsibility to think about not just how we plan to use this data, but how could someone else use this data, and are there potential harms here? I think that's something that's really important, and making sure that you get other people to review it so that your gaps in knowledge are being covered by other people, so that you have a lower risk of having some potentially dangerous data or or things like that. So yeah, like making sure that you're asking yourself those questions of like, do we need this? Can we do this with less? And like, is this going to be stored securely and properly? And do you have the consent of everyone involved, especially when you're dealing with people's data, like something that has to do with people. So like in tech, that's a little bit different, but I'm sure that other people on the panel could talk a bit more about sustainability data and the ethics of sustainability data there.
Yeah, like we say, data in the wrong hands is a weapon of destruction.
Yeah, exactly.
It's new oil.
Yeah, and I mean, we collect a lot of data, and sometimes like you never use it, and so it's expensive to store and it's expensive to deal with. So like, and it's potentially a liability if someone could get into it. So like, I know our legal team, and not just our legal team, but just our data practitioners are very kind of like, let's try and limit our risk and make sure that we're trying to do things as responsibly as possible. So that's
a very good approach, at least when handling the data.
Yeah.
So this was on the point of industry. So Amanda, we would love to know how is the data and ethics being talked about in academia? So it is not just the research that we're talking about when we are making courses, when we are, so especially in this world of data science, when you are asking people to use data in your, say, collaborative assignments, you have to make the students conscious, aware that how are they using the data, the applications they're using, is it going to harm somebody? So how does things evolve when we think it from the academia and especially from sustainability point of view?
Yeah, so I would say that in the environmental research communities that I'm part of, this idea of environmental data justice is something that a lot of people are thinking about right now. And if that's something you're curious about, you can look up the Environmental Data Governance Initiative. They've done a lot of great work and thinking trying to articulate this. But at its heart, it's really about thinking critically about the entire data lifecycle and who gets to participate. So like who gets to participate in collecting data and interpreting it and deciding what to do with it. It's not just about the data we have too, but also like what are the silences in the data? What's the data we don't have and who's not participating in that? And I think it's really important because it reminds us that data is never neutral. Actually, the data is always created managed something in some kind of social context. And that's really important in the context of environment as well. So for instance, I do a lot of work on environmental justice, which looks at lots of different dimensions, but one of which is looking at disparities in exposure to environmental harms. That's definitely a place where we can ask about like where are their data silences, like why is there not monitoring in fence line communities that are more often marginalized? Why is there poor data there? But then also once that data is collected, who gets to use it? Who gets to make decisions about it? And so often data is extracted from marginalized communities and then used by other people, and those communities don't actually get to decide what it means, you know, whether or not that data is benefiting them. Yeah. So I think that's definitely something as researchers that we're thinking about in terms of data, as well as thinking throughout that life cycle, thinking who is involved in that and trying to make sure as many voices as possible are participating.
Yeah, it's good to see how research has over time actually realized that we cannot just work with data. We have to be careful how we actually use this data. It is not just an industry problem anymore. It is a more wide-scale problem.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about data in general, sustainability in general, and like how you guys have actually entered this field. But as an individual, speaking as a woman in tech and women in your fields, your responsibilities have evolved over time. You started somewhere you were there somewhere a couple of years before, and maybe you did not think where will you be in today's time. So I just want to like go rounds and talk to and just listen to everybody on how have your responsibilities evolved as your career have progressed, or as you became senior in a position, both from academia and industry point of view, so that we know how things evolve in both fields. So Lara, would you like to take up this question first?
Yeah, sure. So in my first position as a data scientist, I was the only one on the team, actually. There was a data scientist. So for some reason in industry, they expected the data scientist to basically lead the product. And I was new to industry entirely. So I had a lot to catch up on in terms of just how industry works in general. But within a year, though, I had a chance to actually grow my team. I first hired another senior data scientist. I had a co-op who I convinced them, make sure you get her as a co-op. I had her as a co-op actually in neuroscience. And when they ended up hiring her within 2 months full time, they didn't want to lose her. So that was great. And then I hired another 2 more junior data scientists. So I grew a team. We got new management and they wanted a manager of the team. So then suddenly I was a manager. And from my point of view, I'm like, these people don't need management. I'm like, what does this mean? Why? Anyways, but it turns out that's actually the best style of management. The ones that just sort of stand back and let the people do what they want and what they can, and they're motivated themselves. You just have to not get in their way. But I think at any point did I feel like I was senior. I was just like, I'm working with people. The more senior I got, the more I just treated the people above me as people. And I think that always just made everything much better. So, and it's the same at Tableau. I think it's very flat. There's no like, I am your boss anywhere. And it's just people learning from each other and figuring out what they need to know. So
let people take responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. And if they don't want it, that's okay too, because some people actually do want to just have a list of things they have to do today or this sprint, and that's it. And that's fine. Like, it's less stressful sometimes, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, you have come a long way, definitely, from maths, physics, data scientists, and now a senior data scientist. Well, you're one of the role models, I believe. There are a lot of people who have never been or explored this field before. Megan, as someone with a degree who started from statistics, do you think that degree actually helped you evolve where you are, and how has your responsibilities evolved over time? Megan, over to you.
I don't know. I think degrees are really helpful to get you in the door. But once you've been working for a little while, your degree doesn't matter at all. It just matters the experience. Like most people that when you're interviewing later on in your career, they're going to want to talk about the most recent things you've been working on and not something that you did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. In some places that will be different. Like if you have a PhD in a really specific, like specialized area, then maybe they want to hire for that, and that might be something that is. But I don't have a PhD. I work with a bunch of PhDs, but I also work with a group of people on my team that are. I have people with very different backgrounds. There's biologists, there's physicists, there's neuroscientists and statisticians, and then also like a journalist. So
That's very diverse.
Degrees aren't exactly the be all and the end all. It's can you do the job? But sometimes the degree is a way to show that you can do that job, right? So I would say early on, they're probably a little bit more important, but it really, really depends on the type of role that you're looking for and the type of work you're trying to do. The stuff that I've done has not really required an advanced degree. It has more required being able to work with people. And I'd say how that has evolved over time is when I started as an analyst, I was working kind of like on teams, but more working with people a lot of the time. So a lot of pair programming, a lot of learning. I had to learn Python on the job. I had to learn SQL on the job, things like that. So where you're kind of pairing with people and working with engineers or working with other data scientists. But as kind of you grow into being a more senior person, at least at Mozilla, the way it's structured is if you're a senior data scientist, what really changes is the scope and the scale of the projects that you're in charge of. So instead of working with someone on a project, you'll own a project yourself and kind of be in charge of coordinating the work and making sure that you get things done on time and things like that. So it's less a matter of like being like, I'm senior, I know everything. It's just the scope of your projects kind of get bigger and bigger as you move up and have more experience. So yeah.
So you really get to learn a lot when you get your hands dirty in the real data and out in the field, I believe.
Yeah, and I feel like the view of like the senior data scientist as someone who knows everything is like kind of wrong. The best part about being on a team with like more than one data scientist is that everyone has kind of different specialties and everyone attacks problems in different ways. And so there are, like, if you're on a good, healthy team, there aren't really stupid questions. You can be like, hey, like, I just don't know how to do this. Like, and you know that certain people will have specialties in different areas. And so if it's like a language problem, you go to the person who's good at language analysis, or if it's an experimentation problem, you go to the physicist who's really good at experimentation or things like that. So
everybody brings their own specialities on the table.
Exactly. And sometimes it's not a data scientist you go to. Sometimes it's, you know, an engineer or a data engineer or something. Yeah. It depends. It's all about being able to work with different people and being able to ask questions, and like, if you don't know something, that's okay. You just have to know who to ask and like how to find it out. And that's how you end up being successful, I think.
Well, I think you really brought, I mean, the anecdotes you told, especially having people from different fields, including a journalist in the data science team, really shows how diverse a team can be. And you don't really need to be data scientist by degree to actually get into this field, which makes it's a very good moral booster. So with this, yes.
Just one thing. I think there's a lot of different data scientists, I think, too. Like, people think of data scientists as only people who do really advanced machine learning, and that is a data scientist, but that is a very specific kind of data science. And not all data science, and especially when people are hiring, they just say data science because they know that that's the word that's popular now, and not necessarily what exactly kind of data science they need. Like, there's a lot of data science that is like business analytics and communicating reports and dashboards and things like that, or, you know, like working with engineers to collect data. So it's
the word data scientist. Cool. The word data scientist gets people on the door for interview.
Yeah,
and, you can
and so if you're looking at a job, like, look at what they actually need you to do, because some people really want to be doing that machine learning, and they get into a job and they realize that actually they're not doing that at all, and they're not happy. So really talk to them about what actually do you need to
deal with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Megan. With this, we're moving to our last question, especially keeping in mind that we have to ask questions that people have been asking and they really want answers. So our last question, and Amanda, I think this is more specific for you, especially since you work with the field of sustainability and also have a lot of collaborators that you work with. How can people who are interested, like not just data scientists, enthusiasts, people in general, who are looking to work with data in sustainability specifically, how can they find mentors and collaborators?
Yeah, it's a good and tough question. I think, in general, my personal approach to finding mentors has in part relied on a recognition that no one person is going to be a perfect mentor in all of these different dimensions. So I feel like it's really useful then to kind of think, or like, what are the different aspects that I'm looking for mentorship in? And it might be that actually, you know, let's say the data science component, it might be separate from the domain knowledge. And so I think being open to that and having a suite of mentors makes it easier to find mentorship in the different areas that you do need. The second thing I would say is that actually, I think one of the biggest things for me in terms of mentorship, though, has been peer mentorship. So like the group of people that I would actually consider, you know, like co-conspirators and my community, the people I would have a really reciprocal relationship with. So probably like the other people on your team when you're doing a hackathon. I find that those people are actually like a great source of mentorship, as even if you're at a similar career stage or entry point, because this is the team of people that, you know, in my experience, are the people that I learn with and learn from and look at my cover letters and do all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I would say, you know, opportunities like this, and when you're looking for mentorship, like looking horizontally, vertically, diagonally, you know, like
reach out to people if you want to collaborate with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Marjan, from the industry point of view, how do you think collaboration or finding mentors come along the way? And maybe you can actually wind up our moderated panel discussion with this answer. You're muted, Marjan.
Okay. I think this question is very related to some of the questions that you ask, how you can involve yourself in this line of work. So it's very important to find your connection, find the people that work in this field and work on the project that you are interested in, and try to show yourself to the people that have a position in this field. So all the things that Amanda mentioned is useful. And yeah.
Amanda really covered a lot of the points.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing that I have personally seen that has helped me at least is sometimes you don't have to expect people who you know to talk to. Cold emailing also helps. If you really like somebody's work and you want to work with them, collaborate with them, it's no harm sending a polite and a cold email telling them that you are interested to work with them and you have, say, some background in this and would you love to work. You never know when they get back. I mean, I have had some positive experiences when people have got back to me, and I really recommend this to people if they are looking for collaborators and even mentorship. So with this, we are actually ending our moderator panel discussion. Thank you so much, everybody, for bringing your opinions and expertise in this field. We have a few questions that people have asked. So I'm going to shoot those questions. The first question, Megan, is specifically for you. So the question is, as a master's student of statistics at SFU, what advice would you have for a fellow second-year stats master's? Back to school.
Good question. I'd say that the things that I found really, really helpful from my master's was the more applied courses because I wanted to work in a more applied field. So making sure that you're taking courses that are actually lined up with the things that you're really interested in doing. Finishing your thesis fast so that you can move on to things if that's what you're looking at doing. For me, I didn't really learn SQL while I was doing my master's. Again, this was like almost 10 years ago. So like our studio wasn't around yet. Like I'm old. So some of these things, you know, like were evolving as we went. So I really wish I had spent a bit more time on SQL while I was doing my master's and practicing like interacting with data that wasn't just like uploading it from a CSV or things like that, because I found that those were the skills that I really needed to brush up on once I started working. And so, yeah, my first interview, the guy was asking like, do you know SQL? I was like, yeah, sure. I'd coded it like 4 times before. I was like, yeah, I know SQL. He was like, can you do a right join? I was like, yes. And he was like, can you do a left join? I was like, yes. And he obviously did not know what he was asking me because he was non-technical, but I just told him that I knew how to do it and then went home and did a bunch of tutorials and was like, yes, I can code SQL now. So yeah, practicing those coding skills. Nowadays, I don't think that would work because everyone has a lot more access to a lot of these things. But this, again, was a while ago when these skills were rare. And I did learn it, so it was useful. But
be confident when you're actually giving the answers.
Don't be overconfident in things that are like way outside of your thing. But I did know what a right join and a left join were. And I was like, yes, I can do those. I was like, that's not hard. But I mean, I'm going to tell you that I can do it. But yeah, just I would say like brushing up on SQL would be really helpful. Knowing one of or both of R and Python are both really helpful. And then being able to have a project, either something that you've worked on through school or a side project that you care about a lot, or probably this hackathon would be a great example, to have those things that you can then talk about when people ask you about your experience, to be able to walk them through a project and your thought process is what people look for when they're hiring. It doesn't need to be a super fancy like thing that you spent 4 years on. If it's a project that you did for school or this hackathon, if you can talk a hiring manager through your thought process and why you did things the way you did and explain the problem that you were trying to solve and how you tried to solve it, then that's going to be really helpful going out into industry, I think.
Perfect. I mean, it's very much on point and some really nice anecdotes, Megan, especially with the left join and right join examples. So the next question, I think it would apply to both academia and industry, especially when I read it, somebody from academia who just came from industry. So the question is, what are some pro tips for getting interview calls and what exactly do people look for in resumes? So in terms of academia, as a supervisor, how would you choose a student? Just by looking at the resume, and as a hiring manager, what do you exactly look at the resume before we actually call them for interviews? So Lara would like to take this up from the industry point of view.
Sure. I put a lot of stuff in the actual Slack, so people have it for later.
Okay, sounds good.
I've gone through too many resumes. I've got resume exhaustion. Unfortunately, most people put barely any details. Like they'll say, I did this little thing, I used this method, I achieved this accuracy. And I'm like, first of all, there's no context to that accuracy. I have no idea what it means. That method, why did you choose it? Did you choose it randomly and you have no idea why? Or did you try other things and they weren't good enough? Or did you just, and it's just adding a little more information, especially as a beginner. You have room on your resume, and projects are good. We don't mind projects, especially if you do not the same project that everyone else did. And this is where it's good again to get your hands dirty and find your own data sets and merge them, because then you're doing something original. And if it's even remotely relevant to the field, then that's going to get noticed, because hardly anyone does that. Like, just try to not do the same thing as everyone else. And yeah.
I will say too, depending on where you're applying to, like we posted a data science position last year, and I think we had over 2,500 applicants in the first 24 hours. And so the actual data science team, we're not the first people to look at those resumes. It goes through a recruiter first, and those recruiters are not necessarily experts in data science. So what they're doing is they're skimming these resumes for, do they match with what the job posting says? And we're working with them to try and make sure that they're not filtering out people that would still be good fits, like we said, with different, very diverse backgrounds that are not necessarily just statistics and physics. But at the same time, making sure that your resume is then tailored to kind of match what the job posting is looking for is going to get you through that first kind of like scan from a recruiter. Like, make sure that it matches enough that your skills are what they are looking for. Yeah.
And no academia resumes in industry. People just use the same one verbatim that they use for a postdoc. I'm like, that doesn't fly. Like, no.
Well, you can definitely, it's easy for you to observe since you've done a postdoc and you know what that resume looks like. And when it comes to industry, you can see, oh, that's what I know it looks like. It's good to know, yeah.
And it should go without saying, but like, make sure that everything's spelled right, and that like your contact info is up to date. Like those little things. Like, I mean, I'm sure that I've done the same thing where like you're frantically updating resume and then sending it and then realizing, but the attention to detail on some of those small things can make a bit of a difference. Yeah.
Another thing is, if your resume on it has an address that is not the city you're applying for, you should probably mention in your cover letter why you're applying. Yeah. Yes. I've had so many people from randomly all over the world, they never even hint why they're applying it. And
makes sense.
Just to mention one small thing, in your resume, it's good to concentrate on the concept instead of the tools. For example, I saw a lot of resume that they mentioned I worked with Python libraries, TensorFlow, PyTorch. Actually, this kind of thing is not the main that you should mention. The concept is more important.
Can you give an example of the concept, Marjan? I was actually going to come to you, and it's great that you hopped in. So can you actually add on to what is that? Can you give an example of it?
For example, for my field, I always mention that I have experience working with convolutional networks, no matter in which
okay, that makes sense.
Library and which, for example, the deep learning library that you use. Because by doing some search, you can find the exact match of the same command that you use, for example, in TensorFlow. The same command in PyTorch, finding it is not a very big deal. So it's important for you to know the concept itself, not the tools that you use. It's important to know one tool to implement.
But good to mention. It's also
to mention that I worked with this one, even this one. So I guess
makes sense.
Yeah.
And tools can change. Like, you can use different tools. Like, sometimes the tools are dictated by the company you work for, not like what you would prefer to work with. Like, I had to learn Python, or I had to learn, because it was just like, that was where the people could code review, and was everyone coded in Python, so I had to learn it. And so showing that you can learn these different tools is actually, it's helpful.
Yeah. And you actually learn them also over in the field when you're actually in that field.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's wind up this question and answer session with Amanda. So as someone from academia, when you get do you call them resume or like a CV when you get them? So when people actually apply to work under in your labs or to collaborate with you, just by looking at the resume or the CV, how do you actually see what a person is actually interested in? Is a person really a good candidate or not? How do you actually filter that out?
And actually, I would say a lot of the same things that people have already been saying here. That last point about context and concept mattering is so important. You need to be able to articulate why your experience connects with the position that you are applying for. And I think people sometimes self-select what experience they put on their resume or CV because they think it has to fall into certain, like very narrow, like certain kinds of boxes. And I think that's not true. Like as long as you can articulate why that kind of experience brings, helped you develop useful skills, understanding of different concepts, then that's the part that's most important. So like whether that's like a hackathon project or, volunteer work you do or other aspects, not just kind of like academic and professional, though of course that is important. The other thing is like it is 2020. So, for the most part, I don't just look at the CV. If you link to your GitHub page or your website or someplace where I can, see more about your portfolio, that's super helpful as well. I think that's, this is maybe for people like later in the academic job career, but one of the, best pieces of advice I got when I entered the job market was like, you should have a website because the first thing someone's going to do after looking at the CV is look you up. So you want to make sure you want to control what they see when they look you up. So
have a one-stop shop where people can actually see if they have to reach out to you or read more about you rather than going back to your CV and again. That's a very, very important point. Somebody told that to me, which is when I made my own website. And that has been super helpful. Thank you for bringing that point up. And thank you everyone to coming here, giving your inputs, answering so many questions. On the career panel, if you think there are questions that you would want to answer, and I see that a lot of questions people specifically want to ask specific panelists, like somebody has asked Amanda, the link to your data sets you mentioned, and people have been asking as a hiring manager, probably Megan and Lara can answer, and as a beginner-friendly questions, Marjan. And in fact, as an experienced person, how did you actually convince your hiring manager that you are the best candidate? Please feel free to answer those questions in Slack. I would also request everybody who are the attendees, if you still have questions, you can still post it. People are on the Slack, and if possible, and if panelists are okay with that, they can come back to those questions tomorrow and answer them, since we're already coming to the end of the day. With this, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Best point of contact right now, what I know, would be Slack to connect with the panelists. And I believe they might be on LinkedIn. So if that is okay, feel free to, but still I would say preference one would be Slack. And with this, thank you everybody for joining. And I hope it was a pretty long day, even for us. Thank you for bearing with us. And I think we are moving on to actually closing ceremony, where we'll be announcing the winners and stuff. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a good one. I'll pass it on to our co-organizers.